meeting Charlie. Him and I had a conversation. He told me what he did. This is definitely a topic that's been on my radar, and I'm really happy to have you come here. And Charlie, they're all yours, and I appreciate everything. Thank you. Let's give a warm welcome.
Thanks, guys. Thanks. Happy to be here. And if I understand correctly, you guys just finished spring break, right? Yes. So appreciate you surviving that and come back here. Excited to be part of the Exchange. I want to congratulate you guys on picking the correct Exchange session to come to. Now, I'm not saying that to be arrogant, but the reality is data analytics is the most important field that you're going to have to understand going into the business world. Even if you're a finance major, marketing major, management major, whatever it is, analytics is going to affect you in the new world that we're living in. Big companies are using analytics, small companies are using analytics, nonprofits are using analytics. This is the future. So before we even get into any of this, some background about me. My name is Charlie Render. I am the CEO of Render Analytics. We are a data analytics agency. We work with all different types of businesses. We work with big companies like Marriott Hotels or Blue Cross Blue Shield. We also work with small and medium-sized businesses, right? So we really have seen the gamut of exercises. Back in the day, I was a Gator. I went to the University of Florida. So if there's any, you guys beat us most recently, so go easy on me. And I studied business intelligence and analytics back then. That's where I got my master's in. After that, spent some time living in DC, New York, working for some of the big companies, understanding kind of how these big, massive corporations are leveraging data. And that's sort of what has led me to Render Analytics. So before we even get into the presentation, just kind of quick question for you guys. What is data analytics? Because I mean, it's a buzzword, I'm sure you've heard of it, and a lot of you are like, oh, that's something I might want to know something about. But what is it? Anyone, please.
Grabbing a bunch of different variables and creating, inferencing models to kind of predict or see where a business is heading or how to create different business plans.
Absolutely, and that's a very good answer. Does anyone want to give almost even more simplified explanation to that? No, it's a good answer. It's the answer of someone who's working in data analytics. But does anyone maybe have even something more layman understanding? No? No one want to take a guess? I see you almost raise your hand there.
Filtering data, maybe?
Filtering data? Yeah, basically. I mean, so essentially, in a nutshell, data analytics is all about this. You've got raw data, you want to turn into meaningful information, right? Every Facebook like, every sale, every product that you sell, the different variations, every customer interaction, every time someone views a billboard you are collecting data. And individually, those pieces of information may not seem very critical. Hey, Bob liked my Facebook post. That's not particularly useful. But when you put them together and you understand the trends related to these individual pieces of data, you end up actually sort of growing your perspective and understanding things in a way that you wouldn't otherwise understand. It's about saying, okay, I could trust my gut or I could trust the data. And most of the time when people trust their guts, they miss some valuable information. And today we're going to go through 3 real-life business use cases of real companies, 2 of them big, 1 small, and how they handled analytics. And I'm going to kind of pick your brains a little bit to see how you would handle it, see how maybe if you can spot something that maybe we missed, and just test your knowledge a little bit. Does that sound good with you guys?
Yep.
So I promise I'm not going to test you in coding knowledge or anything like that. So actually, before I even get into this, show of hands, who has ever shopped at Target before? Okay, basically everybody. And how many of you actually get email promotions from Target? Like maybe they send you promotional deals, something like that, discounts. A few of you, okay. What kind of things do you like to buy at Target?
Mostly groceries.
Oh, you're a grocery shopper at Target, okay. And when you get these coupons, are you getting, or promotional emails, are you getting promotional emails for?
Similar products I typically purchase.
Gotcha. And someone else who said they get the promotions?
I just get everything.
You get everything at Target. Maybe some home good stuff.
Yeah.
You get the promotional emails, and you're not is there anything? Are you getting, products similar to what you purchase or you browse, or are you getting like, tools and promotions for things that are perhaps not relevant to you? So it's not an accident, right? Target, when they send these promotional emails to you, they want to make sure that when they send you a deal, you're actually going to use it. They don't want to send this gentleman over here something, with arts and crafts. He's probably not going to be interested, right? It's a waste of money for them. It's a waste of resources. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about a story that was in the New York Times a couple of years back, but it's actually very relevant today. So when Target actually sends you these emails, or any promotion, any company sends these promotions. What they use is called a predictive model, right? They analyze your past behavior, past purchases you've had. If you're shopping online, they even study your behavior outside of the purchases. You know, what were you browsing for? What was your search history? And they use that to inform what they think that you need to buy next, and they're going to send you a promotional email for that so they can get more of your money, right? Now, this story in the New York Times. A few years ago, there was a manager working at a local Target, and he's going about his day, and a very angry customer walks in, and he comes right up to him and he says, "Sir, how dare you? My 15-year-old daughter was receiving promotional messages for baby and pregnancy products. Products like cribs and bibs and items that related to when she was pregnant. He said, why are you promoting pregnancy products to my 15-year-old daughter? You want my 15-year-old daughter to be pregnant? What's wrong with you?" The manager had no idea what was going on, right? He says, "I'm so sorry. There's obviously some sort of misunderstanding." You know, apologetic, as you would imagine. A few days later, because he takes his customer experience seriously, he calls him back up again, apologizes again. But this time, the father, had a different tone of voice. He said, "Actually, I owe you an apology. Apparently, there's some things going on in my household that I was unaware of. Apparently, the 15-year-old daughter was pregnant, and Target's predictive model was able to figure that out before their own parents." So, you know, wow, that's a problem, right? So the first question I'm going to open up to you guys here is there a problem with this? Is there such thing as a violation of privacy in the way that we have data analytics going today? At the end of the day, Target just wants to sell their products. But as a result, they've obviously interfered with the privacy of, you know, this little girl and her family. Maybe they're violating the privacy of someone who just wants to shop without, you know, being analyzed. So I'll kind of open up to you guys here. What do you think? Anyone have any thoughts? This is going to be interactive, so please don't stay quiet the whole time, guys.
I kind of feel like, yeah, I mean, like, we saw what happened with, like, Facebook, and they tightened up their security with their ads as well. Like, I think a lot of people kind of felt like that was a violation of privacy. And I would kind of imagine people would react similarly to the Target situation.
Do you think there's any reasonable defense of Target?
I mean, yeah, I'm sure, like, at some point you agreed to something, whether you realized it or not, and that would probably be their defense, I would imagine.
Right, but from an ethical perspective.
Yeah.
Legally, they're protected. Hate to break it to you guys, all of your data is being analyzed, whether you like it or not. But do you see there being an ethical concern here, I guess is my question.
I mean, like, I think most people would say yeah, but when it comes to a business like the size of Target, I would assume that a lot of times it's black or white to the people making those decisions, and
Yeah.
not necessarily considering the ethical, just what gets them in the green.
That's very well said. Does anyone want to take kind of the opposite position, that there's nothing wrong with Target?
I feel like it depends on how they got the data. Like if they just got it based on what you're purchasing, like they're gonna have that data regardless. So like I don't think there's anything wrong with using that data of what you purchase.
So you think it's how they're acquiring the data?
Yeah.
So do you think there's a line between, let's say, purchasing data, you know, you've made the transaction with Target, they're allowed to analyze that, versus search or browsing or things like that? Because I mean, you're using their website.
Well, no, then that's again, that's their data. Like they're providing a service. I think that starts getting a little iffy once they start purchasing data from others
Sure.
areas or start selling your data. I think that's where it gets a little ethically.
Does anyone want to challenge him on that? Want to say that no, even though it's being collected by Target, there's actually concern there? No one think there's an ethical concern, really. So some people might say, hey, you know, it's my data, right? And that's really the debate that's going on right now within a lot of these massive corporations is who owns the data? You're on Target's website, all right, it's fair game. Or if you're shopping in their stores, but at the end, and other people are saying, kind of what you were hinting at the end of the day, I just want privacy, you know, and yeah, I live in a world where I shop at Target, that's the most convenient thing, and I have a right to sort of privately shop at Target. Does anyone have any other kind of thoughts on that they maybe want to throw out there? No one else? All right, so let me ask you a second question then. Target was more accurate at predicting this little girl's pregnancy than their own parents. Is there an issue with predictive power? As we're moving forward in society, you probably all are aware of this, you know, being young people, that we're seeing that ultimately these algorithms are often predicting things in the future that we as humans just can't simply be on the ball about. Do any of you guys worry at all, considering the fact that you're the next generation, that we're going to end up having a situation where the technology is better at running our businesses, making decisions than ourselves? Someone throw it out? I thought I heard something over there. You, sir, please.
I was just like, I don't know, I think it's, in most areas, yeah, it will take over certain jobs that can be analyzed, but like, I think there's some things that just come down to one's own intuition or something like that, that the data doesn't have there's no data for it. Like, it can't analyze it. Like, there's little stuff that's said and not written down.
Like what?
I don't know, words spoken between managers that aren't writing down like a formal contract or
So our human, what you're kind of saying is our human place is the little intricacies between these massive data sets.
essentially.
Well, I hope that we have a world that we have a little bit more role than that. But you certainly could be right, and that there's certainly that is the direction that we're heading in right now. So we talked about a little bit about Target here. Next company that we're going to talk about here. How many of you guys watched the Super Bowl this in February here? Most of you? Tell me if this commercial rings a bell.
The estimated hold time is
From the Super Bowl this year.
less than 96 minutes.
Does anyone remember this commercial or no? I see a couple of you cringing just at the sound of the music here.
We thank you for your patience.
Sorry, are you still there?
Yes.
Okay, please hold.
I won't make you guys listen to the whole commercial there. So, throw your hands up if you've ever had to call a call center before, for any reason. Every single person here looks like. How many of you enjoyed your call center experience? Not a single person here liked calling the call center, for whatever reason. You're not alone. Turns out everyone hates calling call centers, right? So Blue Cross Blue Shield, they came to us, they're a client of ours, they came to us a couple years ago, and they had a pretty specific problem. They said, look, we know everyone hates our call centers. We're losing money. And this is the customer experience team that reaches out to us, and they say, we want to prove that actually being good to our customers, increasing customer experience, and actually making it an improved interaction, we want to prove that's actually financially successful for Blue Cross Blue Shield. In other words, can we quantitatively prove that whether or not a customer is happy actually impacts our retention rates or our sales, or next time it's time to renew, they actually spend a more expensive package with us, something along those lines. It'd be great to prove good customer experience is good for our bottom dollar, right? That would be a great thing that they could validate, and of course, this team wants to justify their own expense, right? So they came to us and they said, all right, figure this out. Prove to us, using data, that a happy customer is a more profitable customer within the insurance space. And so we analyzed plenty of different sort of dimensions that we looked at different surveys. We looked at whether or not people with positive survey results, that classic 1 to 5, how satisfied are you, 1 to 10, how likely are you to recommend it to someone else. And we were able to identify whether or not happy customers and unhappy customers behave differently. Now, as it turns out, in the insurance space, specifically for Blue Cross Blue Shield, that wasn't really the case. You guys are all pretty young. Most of you probably are on your parents' plan still. But what we're going to find out is that insurance is expensive. And the number one factor that actually contributes towards whether or not someone wants to stay with you as a customer or spend more money is the price, right? Fair enough. Blue Cross Blue Shield doesn't want to hear that. So we go back to it, and we actually find one place where the customer experience actually had a significant impact on whether or not a customer would be retained at the end of the renewal cycle. They would keep paying Blue Cross Blue Shield. The call center. If a customer had a very negative call center experience, they'd get pissed, right? They would basically say, okay, I'm going to look at competitors, I'm going to look at other options, I'm going to go for smaller plans. So this is where I'm going to kind of test your guys' instinct here to see if you'd be able to figure this out. So you guys all said that you've called call centers before, right? So I want you guys to determine I want you guys to see if you can figure out what's the number one factor in determining whether someone has, one, a positive call center experience, and two, whether or not their issue is actually resolved, right? So you guys all said that you called call centers. You tell me. Take a guess. No wrong answers here.
I would say wait time.
Wait time is a huge factor, as the commercial indicates here. But it's not the number one factor. But you're right, it's one of the top 4 or 5 factors. If someone's waiting on hold for 30 minutes, even if they get their issue resolved, they're going to be angry. The problem with hold time, as far as implementing it as a solution, is that ultimately the only shortcut to that, the only solution for that is hiring more people to work the phones, which is an expensive solution. And Blue Cross Blue Shield is looking for easy wins, right? But you're right, hold time's a major factor.
I almost want to say, like, if the representative's like internal rather than outsourced, like they'd understand the issue better.
Absolutely. So internal versus outsourced, and I'll get to you in a second. I'll expand on that within the United States or outside the United States. Now, the number 2 factor overall was whether or not a call center took place within the United States or one of Blue Cross Blue Shield satellites, which are mostly in the Philippines. Again, that was the number 2 factor, so you're right on the money on that. And again, the problem with that though was moving a call center to internal staff or to within the United States is expensive. It's really expensive. There's a reason they send it to the Philippines, right? They don't want you to just get frustrated, right? They don't enjoy that you call a call center and you're furious. You know, it's just at the end of the day you're trying to cut costs. So, very good guess. That was the number 2 factor.
Like confrontation, people like calling these kind of places and to deal with someone kind of, you know, like a lot of people like just emails and just scared of just having to speak to someone.
So you're absolutely right, right? Just having the personality of the person answering the phone was also a huge factor. It's hard to account for when you're Blue Cross Blue Shield, right? It's like you could hire people and factor in their, you know, personality into the evaluation process. As it turns out, the only thing that people hate more than calling call centers is working at call centers. And it's, you know, at the end of the day, it is hard to be, you know, choose the cream of the crop in terms of acquiring talent. Anyone have any other guesses about the number 1 factor in indicating whether or not, 1, a call was resolved, and 2, that the customer is satisfied? You've all called call centers.
I guess maybe if there's like a system in place that helps direct them to the answer before they even have to talk to someone too.
So I would put that kind of in hold times in the sense that you're right. Like if they sort of have a smooth pass where you're talking to the right person quickly and you don't have to go through the menu and click 20 buttons to talk to a person, that certainly was a factor. I'll give you guys a hint a little bit. Think more about the personnel.
Is it like the music that's on hold? Like if they play the same thing over and over again?
Great question. I wish we analyzed the whole music. I don't have an answer for you there.
Are you pointing towards if they got to speak to a live representative or if they just got to speak to like an AI?
Live representative, significantly more likely to be a successful call. So you're right about that. Wasn't the number one. Assuming they talk to a human being, what is an important factor here?
Kind of goes along the line of the outsource, but it's like whether you can understand the person or not.
Yes, so that's not number 1, but I would put that in the outsource. Frustrations over language barriers was a huge factor. Yeah, you.
Oh,
This
okay,
time you.
sure. Just like the friendliness and like the knowledge that representative has over the subject.
The knowledge is the key word there. Now, as it turns out, there was one factor above all others, and it's actually not that expensive. How long the call center rep had been working there. Turns out, a call center rep who's on the 1st month of the job, and a call center rep who's on the 6th month of a job, and a call center rep who's been there for a year, were significantly different levels of expertise in solving these problems. Now, we all named a bunch of things here. That was the number 1 factor. And the difference between a call center rep who'd been working there for a month and a call center rep who'd been working there for 6 months, despite having the same training, was about a 10 to 15% call resolution rate, right? That's a huge amount when you're thinking about the scale of a massive company like Blue Cross Blue Shield. So, what ends up happening? We go back to them and we say, you need to do a better job of retaining your current employees. Because you're, as you could probably imagine within the call center space, people quit quickly. They get their job, they get a few paychecks, they move on to the next move. We said to them, you need to do a better job of making your talent happy and making them not want to switch to the next opportunity. So they roll out a couple of initiatives, nothing crazy, a little more training, a couple more benefits that aren't too expensive. And lo and behold, Blue Cross Blue Shield ends up having an increase in retention rate and ends up making millions and more dollars just by retaining their call center staff more. So does anyone have any questions on that? That's another sort of another use case of a big company using data analytics. You want to kind of add thoughts to that at all? Please.
How do you grab all that data and get to that conclusion?
Great question. So when you're working for a big company like Blue Cross Blue Shield, they already have access to a lot of data. We're about to do an example of a smaller business, but they're collecting survey data. They're collecting call center survey data. So if you've ever been on the call center and at the end they're like, we'd like you to take a quick survey, blah, blah. They study that data at aggregate. They're not reading your individual responses, but they're taking those responses as part of a larger population. And then of course, then we're tying those same individuals to their shopping behavior, right? At the end of the renewal cycle, are they paying for a new plan? Are they upgrading their plan? Are they going to a competitor? And that's sort of, it's like segment A, satisfied customers, segment B, dissatisfied customers. Is there a difference between these two groups? That's essentially the kind of the data that we're collecting there. Call center data, survey data, and actual purchasing data for that particular exercise. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Yeah, awesome, perfect. Anyone have any other questions or thoughts on Blue Cross use case here? No, okay. So we talked about two big companies already, right? Everyone knows Target. It seems like most people here recognize Blue Cross Blue Shield. Let's not listen to this again, here we go. So the third example here is a small company, a client of ours, Thrive Realty. They're a small real estate agent. They're in upstate New York. You've never heard of them, and that's kind of why I'm describing them here. They don't have all the resources in the world. So they have slightly different problems. They're a real estate agency, right? They want to sell and buy houses, right? I mean, they want to sell houses or buy houses, make their commission, whatever it is. Now, they don't have that much money, right? And in order to actually, there's a million real estate agents out there. If you ever looked to buy a place before, you know that real estate agents are all over the place. So they said, how do we actually acquire customers for cheaper? We have salespeople. We have marketing budgets that we spend on tools like Facebook, Instagram, Zillow, newspapers, magazines, Google, you name it. But man, we are going to go out of business if we cannot acquire customers for cheaper. That was the problem that came to us. And that's a real problem that a lot of small businesses have. Acquiring customers is not cheap, and it's not easy. You got to convince someone that you're better than all other alternatives, especially in a business like real estate where there's a million competitors out there and they're all basically offering the same houses. So we analyzed their data and we identified some ways that they can improve their return on investment for their marketing and sales spend in order to make more money and actually become profitable in their customer acquisition strategy. So I'm going to test you guys again here. In case you can't tell, this is going to be a little bit of testing back and forth. So the first, I'm going to ask you a few questions. Each one is a factor of our analysis that we determined. I want to see if you can figure out what the correct answer was. So I'll start off easy. One of the things we analyzed was when they had a lead, if they called that lead on the phone or if they sent them an email. Just using your hands, how many of you think that they had a higher conversion rate when they called the lead on the phone as opposed to sending an email? So let's say like 60, 70%. How many of you think that the email was the more effective means of communication? A few hands, okay. Now that was the easy one. Sorry for the minority of you guys here. The correct answer was phone call for this particular business. And again, this varies business to business, right? This is why you do the analysis. What's good for me might not be what's good for you. So that one's not too tricky. Let's see if I can get you guys, maybe catch you off guard here. So which of these 6 lead sources here do you think was the most effective in terms of getting the best return on investment for their marketing spend? All of these cost money, right? It costs money to have an article in the Orlando Sentinel, ad in the Orlando Sentinel. It costs money to post paid advertising on Instagram. So how many of you think that Facebook was the #1 channel, raising hands here, in terms of acquiring real estate customers? 1 person? 2? All right, how about Instagram? A couple more hands. Zillow? A few hands. How about print media, all the combined newspapers and magazines together? A few hands here. And then what about Google? Okay, so the majority of you guys are saying Google. For this particular business, as it turns out, it was Zillow, right? And the reason, and again, this is a perfect example of the value of data analytics, right? How many people in this room could be a decision maker for that business and say, you know what, we need to put our money in Google, and then you're throwing your money away, or at least you're not getting the best return on investment that you possibly can. The whole point of data analytics is maybe the reality is not what our intuition is telling us. Maybe there's something here that we're not actually identifying. Okay, so that was kind of the middle one. Let me give you one more question here. I think this one will really throw you guys off. You get in contact with a lead. It's a quality lead. How many days between the first point of communication and the follow-up should go by in order to be the sort of reach that customer at the perfect time? In other words, hey, I called them up or I emailed them, they responded to me. How many days should I wait to reach out to them again? Should I reach out 1 day, 2 day, 3 day, 4 days, or 5 days? So I'll kind of do another poll here. How many people think that it was appropriate to wait exactly 1 day after reaching out to this lead to follow up with them? Couple hands, okay? How many people think it was 2 days? Couple hands, 3 days? Okay, most of you? 4 days? Nobody? 5 days? A few more hands. So the majority was 3, but it really was scattered. The reality was it was 2 days for this particular business. And again, you know, maybe this is intuitive to some of you, but the reality is the data revealed a trend that they were totally unaware of. There were a few other factors we analyzed, but these are a few kind of basic examples to demonstrate. So in the end, they end up putting more of their marketing budget in Zillow, disproportionately. They end up calling their leads back within exactly 2 days, not 1 day, not 3, 2. And they, of course, started calling on the phone more. They end up tripling the return on investment. Tripling the return on investment. It actually became profitable to acquire new customers, and the company was no longer at risk of going out of business. So this is how a use case of how even a small business can get ahead of the trend here. So with that in mind, we just kind of went through 3 business examples here. I'd love to kind of hear from you guys what you think. Maybe some other cool examples of how one might be able to use data analytics in a business setting specifically. There are no wrong answers. Well, there are, but I won't criticize you. Anyone else have a guess?
If you're a small business, would you like to hire another business to do your data analytics, or is there a software you can personally use?
Great question. Great question. So it depends what your needs are and how much money you got to spend. Now, thankfully, we're living in a world where data analytics is becoming more and more affordable to use, which is why businesses like Thrive can actually take advantage, right? There are plenty of free tools out there. If you have a website, Google Analytics is a totally free tool to analyze all of the data on your website, right? Where people are clicking, how long they're staying on the site, where they came from, you know, what pages they're looking at. If you want to do Google Ads, they have all the data available to you. If you want to build a reporting dashboard where you can see all of your metrics, there are free builders out there. Some of the work is technical, so the question kind of is answered in whether or not you as the business owner or decision maker or internal team think that you can handle it yourself, or if you prefer to offboard it into professional hands. Obviously, our job is to be that offboarding into professional hands. Usually, the complexity for us depends on the individual needs of the client. I've seen clients who manage it all themselves. I've seen clients who just say, you know what, I've got to run my business. I don't have time for this. Go, you do it. Talk to me once a month. So it really goes both ways. Does that answer what you're saying? You're asking, or you have kind of a clarification there?
No, that's pretty accurate.
All right, cool. Anyone else? Questions, comments? I want one more use case about how we could use analytics, you think?
I like introducing a new product. You can like ask customers like what they want in the product and like do like A/B testing and see if it works.
I'm glad you mentioned A/B testing there. So both of those examples work. So for those of you who are unfamiliar with A/B testing, this is huge now. This is the forefront of the field. So no matter where you're going to go after school, you bring up A/B testing, you're going to sound smart to your future employers. A/B testing is exactly what it sounds like. It's a test. It's an experiment. So the most common use case for A/B testing is on websites. What is an A/B test? Does anyone know what an A/B test is?
It's like where you just split up like my experience is like in SMS marketing with A/B tests. Like basically 2 different groups will get 2 different versions of text. Some may have a picture, some may not, and then it'll pick the more effective version and proceed with that following the test.
Exactly. I couldn't have said it better myself, but I'll try to. Yeah, exactly. You have two or more variations of the same experience, and you try to test to see if one experience outperforms the other. So I wish I don't have slides for this, unfortunately, but we actually offer this as a service. So imagine on a website, you have a button that says Shop Now, and that's the main button you want someone to click, right? That gets them into your funnel. Maybe one version of that test, the Shop Now button is green, and the other version, the Shop Now button is red. Does that actually affect your bottom line? Does that actually increase your conversion rate? Only one way to find out. You might have guesses, but A/B testing is a way to validate that. Another example might be changing the photos or redesigning your whole page. There's a lot of applications for A/B testing, but that is one more common use case here. Does anyone else have one? No? Fair enough. So we talked about successes, but considering we were just mentioning Zillow, I want to talk about one cautionary tale. How many of you guys have ever been on Zillow's website? Maybe to rent or look to buy a property even? Most of you? So for those of you who have not, Zillow is a real estate peer-to-peer platform. You go on there to post a listing of the property you want to rent or sell, and other people go on there to try to find a place to rent out or to rent or sell. Zillow has a calculation on there, for those of you who have been on there, called the Zestimate score, if you've ever been on Zillow. The Zestimate score, for those who are not aware, is essentially their own predictive model. The Zestimate score is a calculation where they take in quite a few factors. They take in the location of the property, the square footage, how new is the property, how big is the lot, a few things like that. And then they try to guess how much that property is worth. And they basically say, according to our Zestimate score, this property is worth $500,000, whatever it is. Now Zillow was very confident about their Zestimate score, a little too confident. In fact, they said, you know what, we're so confident that this score is better than what the open market is telling us, we're going to start buying properties that we think are being undervalued based on our Zestimate score, and then we're going to then flip those properties for profit. Pretty simple strategy if the Zestimate score is solid. Turns out the Zestimate score was not solid, and they ended up losing millions and millions and millions of dollars. They ended up firing most of their data science team, they had massive layoffs, and they of course took a huge loss on this project. So why do I bring up an example like Zillow and their Zestimate score here? Kind of two reasons. One, you should always validate the accuracy of your models or the data analytics that you're doing at a smaller scale before going all in, right? At the end of the day, all you're doing is giving yourself more information, but you might still be missing something by using data analytics. And then number two, make sure that you actually have quality data. Turns out Zillow didn't actually even validate the accuracy of their model against their own data. So don't make that mistake. Anyone have any questions on that, or thoughts, or maybe an example of in their own lives of how they trusted the data and they were dead wrong? No one wants to be that bad example here? Fair enough. Well, look, we talked a little bit about data here. Some of you might be wondering, why is all this baking stuff on this table? So I'm going to do a little bit of a demonstration here to kind of wrap things up and open up to questions. So data analytics is a lot like baking in some ways, right? You have a bunch of raw inputs, and you want to create something that's better than the sum of the parts, right? A lot of raw data, you want output. In baking, you've got a bunch of ingredients. Individually, not too tasty. For example, I got some flour here. But when you put them together, it actually becomes a nice treat. So I'll put a little bit of flour in there. Tasty treat, I like to have a little bit of sugar. I don't know about you guys. All right, let's get that good sugar in there. Oh yeah, that's the good stuff. I personally like chocolate chips. Anyone want a chocolate chip? No? All right, please so. All right, I want one though. Put a few of those in there. Perfect. That actually is tasty on its own. Maybe crack an egg. There we go. Let's get that mess out. And maybe even a little bit of firewood, get things heated. All right. That's good. Perfect. A little bit of water. I'll use my own. Perfect. And sorry, Justin, that I didn't tell you this, but I'm also gonna add some lighter fluid. So let's get a little heat in there. Oh yeah, get that nice and ready to go here. Should we see data analytics in action here? I'll move this back for all of our sakes here. The last exchange speech. There we go. Nice fire. And then what do you get? Delicious output there. So I'm just gonna throw this on the tray here. You guys enjoy that as you will. There you go. I'm gonna pass that around. Take one if you like. Here, you gonna take the tray? Thanks, man. Appreciate it. All right. So data, and just to kind of wrap up that analogy here, it really does work the same way, right? Individually, each of these ingredients don't seem like anything special. When you put them together, you get sort of a sum of the parts that's greater than, or I should say, some synergy here that's greater than the sum of the parts. So guys, I really do appreciate your time here. I do think we have a few minutes left, right, Justin? I don't know where you are. All right, cool. So if you're ever curious, just talk a little bit more about analytics with me. Feel free to just reach out. We've got a fun Instagram page as well where we just kind of post fun charts and graphs about anything. But before we wrap up here, I'd love to just open up to questions. There is no bad question. Yeah. No questions. Yeah, I've answered every question you guys have. Please.
What would you say is like the best way of like staying on top of like what's next in terms of the technology of data analytics? Like, where's the best place to go for them?
To stay on top of the trends. So, tell me now, what data are you using in your life?
So I work for a small retailing company, so a lot of like A/B testing, conversion rates. You know, people bounce in from checkout. It's probably a shipping issue. Drop it to free shipping, conversions go up, kind of thing.
What website are you guys on? Just like Shopify or something?
Yeah,
like
we're
that?
Shopify. So
Yeah.
we have a lot of data presented to us as well.
So thankfully, a lot of these tools will stay on top of it, stay on top of it themselves, right?
Yeah.
Shopify has a bunch of built-in tools to, sort of progress forward. But also things happen in the space where the disruptors are, incapable of being ignored. For example, how many of you write your papers with ChatGPT? Smart. No, all right, you're not the smart one. I'm just kidding. Don't tell me that if you actually do. But, we all know about ChatGPT now, right? That's a huge disruptor in the space. Right now, the way that the data is sort of going, the way that the industry is going is becoming more and more automated, right? The value of coding is going down. There will still always be value in having coding skills, but it's going to sort of become more easily interfaced, right? Someone who doesn't have a background in data analytics is going to be able to leverage it. How do you stay on top of that? Well, you stay informed, you stay on top of the news headlines and whatnot, and then you also kind of follow the biggest tools in the space and see where they go. Google has got so many different data tools up their sleeve. All the main website builders do. There's tools for SEO, there's tools for sales, there's tools for marketing. If you follow the big players, you'll see where the trend is going. Good question. Anyone else? Please.
What made you decide to go into your own practice rather than just working for a big company?
Because I hate big companies. No, but I mean, I did that for quite a few years, right? When I graduated school, I worked for PwC for a little bit, hated every second of it. So if anyone's doing that, good luck. Worked for a couple big companies in New York, and there's value in it, right? I gained really important experience, and I learned a lot of the technical skills that I could to start my own company. But ultimately, they move kind of slow, and it's not really passionate work. Usually, you have a single responsibility, and that's all you do. And I kind of liked working on larger projects and helping people, and it's kind of fun to help take the same techniques that the Targets, the Blue Cross Blue Shields of the world are doing, and helping small businesses use that same skill. Because when you do the actual impact, for a Blue Cross Blue Shield, a few $1 million is nothing. But for a small business, that's the make or break of that person's entire life, So there is sort of this value there that I enjoy.
Yeah. So with that, for someone coming out of college, would you advise them to work on a startup maybe so your hand is a little you wear a little more hats or something, and then maybe do your own thing later on, or?
That's a great question. So It's funny, when I was at UF, they had this incubator program where after you graduated, they had a bunch of UF funded startups that you could hop on. And they said to me, you should do this, you should do this. And I was like, nah, I want to make money. And I went that other route, the corporate route. Part of me wishes I went back, because you're certainly working at a startup, you're going to make less money, but you're going to learn way more. But on the flip side, there really is nothing going wrong with going corporate for a while. Or, you know, even if that's what you like to do, there's nothing wrong with that generally. You're going to learn a lot either way. I don't think when I was 22 years old, I was ready to start my own business yet. I think that either way, work for a company where you're growing and where you're learning. As soon as you stop learning and it's just like, this is my job, I know what to do, I can do it with one hand behind my back, it's like that's when it's time to move on. You know, you're just stagnant at that point. Any other questions, guys? Please.
So I'm working in an analyst position currently. We're kind of, you know, there's a few tools we use like Power BI or a few other things.
Sure.
What would you say is the biggest tool or skill that someone coming out of college and working at that entry level could learn?
So,
focus on?
Great question. So if you want to work in data analytics, so a lot of you guys are finance majors and you just want to understand this at the periphery, you know, that's one thing. If you want to legitimately be in the data analytics space, there are 2 coding languages that I really recommend you learn. The first is pretty easy. It's SQL, structured query language. It's barely even a language, to be honest. But a lot of, especially entry-level jobs, will really value the fact that you know that skill. Number 2, I think I just saw you whispering, was Python. Is that what you were whispering? Yeah. Python is a little more complex. It's the future of coding. I should say it's the present of coding. Every major business uses Python. Things like C#, Java, totally obsolete in the real world. Maybe in academia, but in the real world, no one's using anything but Python. So that's the number 1 skill. You mentioned Power BI. That's more like data visualizations, like building charts and graphs. That's huge. Tableau is another big competitor in the market for that too. Anyone else? That's it? I think you had a question at one point?
Yeah, I was kind of like seeing, are like a lot of data analytics jobs kind of moving remote? Like, or would you say they a bit affected because of that COVID kind of?
For me, I only hire people remote now, right? So I only hire remote. I don't want you to come to my office. Yeah, it's going that way. I will say COVID obviously accelerated that, and there feels like there's a little bit of a coming back to earth where some of the big corporations do want you to come in. But it's one of those spaces that if you really want to work remote, it's probably the easiest space to work remote. Yeah, which I personally like. Yeah.
How long have you been operating Render Analytics now?
We started in late 2018, so it's been quite a few years. First couple years were rough, as it is starting a business, but you know, you get traction, you start getting referrals, start growing the brand, and you know, it's a long, winding journey. Yeah, are you looking to open your own business?
I mean, that's always like in the back of my head,
Yeah.
juggling it back and forth to school. But I mean, again, I feel like what you mentioned where like when you were 22, like it felt like now in retrospect you're like, oh, like I probably would not have enjoyed it or not been as successful as you are now, and that's kind of like where I'm at. But maybe that's just like putting myself
Yeah.
in like a ceiling situation.
No, and here's the other thing, right? It's like you don't have to choose. You know, do your day job, get that money, you know, do what you have to do, learn the skills, and maybe start as like a side hustle or something, you know, start small, even if it's not profitable yet. That way you can pay your bills and whatnot. I started Render Analytics the first year and a half. I had a full-time job outside of Render Analytics, right? So, you know, it's a very beautiful day where you get to quit that job finally, and you're like, I can now officially sustain myself on this. So, you know, you don't have to choose. As long as you have a vision and you're diligent and whatnot. All right, guys, unless anyone has any other questions, I'll let you guys go. I really appreciate your time today. Yeah, please, again, reach out to me if you'd like. Happy to answer any other questions you guys have. Take care, have a good one, guys. Enjoy the weather a little bit.